Hello and welcome back to a brand new episode of my true crime podcast, The True Crime Cocktail Hour. Happy 2026. I hope you all rocked into the new year safely and that you guys had some wonderful holidays. My name is Holly and I'll be your personal bartender tonight. So as for now, I'll be mixing us a little after-work cocktail, pre-weekend after-work cocktail. And while I do that, I will also tell you the story of a mysterious true crime case. And today's case is all about a very unusual murder weapon. So sit back and relax, I'll get everything ready, and then we will get started with case number 106, the college parasite poisoning. So for today's story, we're traveling back to the year 1970 and to Canada. To be more specific, to the small town of Saint-Anne-de-Bellevue in Quebec, which is where you'll find McGill University, one of the top colleges in the entire country. William Shatner and Burt Bacharach went to college there. Well, now you know. So one of the McGill University's campuses is the MacDonald campus, where you'll find the faculties of environmental and agricultural sciences, as well as human nutrition. And just a few minutes walk from the MacDonald campus, you'll find the so-called Maple House. Now, the Maple House is not officially a student's dorm, but it's commonly used as such. And in the year 1970, 6 young men moved into Maple House together, 6 young men who will be at the center of today's story. Number one is Richard Davis. He's 24 years old, originally from Ontario, and he's an engineering student. And he is the life of the party. He makes friends super easily. He plays a lot of sport, hockey, badminton, you name it. And he's just very popular, very extroverted guy. Next on the list, we have David Fisk. He's also 24 years old, originally from Quebec. He also studies engineering, just like Richard. But his great passion is actually photography, and he also serves as one of the editors of the students' newspaper. Next, we have 22-year-old William Butler, who's from Quebec. He's also studying engineering, and in his free time, he likes to play hockey. Number 4 is Raymond Keith Fern from Ontario. His first field of study was actually education, but after a year, he switched to agriculture and plant pathology. And in his free time, he likes to play badminton and he competes in track and field. Number 5 on the list is John Purdon. And I know what you're thinking, but I swear on my life, this poor bastard is 26 years old. He studies water resource management. He's also a curling enthusiast. And he likes to compete in lumberjack contests. Here you can see him with his team. He's the one front row on the right. And last but not least, there is 23-year-old Eric Kranz. He is not from Canada. He originally comes from Hampstead, New York, and he's the son of a wealthy dentist. And he is a member of the rugby team, again with his team front row on the right. And if there is a black sheep in the student's apartment, it would be Eric, because his personal motto seems to be take yes, give no. He also got a very freestyle, laissez-faire attitude when it comes to paying his rent, on time or at all, despite coming from money. So as a result, all of his other roommates have to cover for him regularly, and so his pile of debt just grows and grows. Now, for the first couple of months, the other roommates kind of tolerated this, but then at the beginning of 1970, they decided they finally had enough. And so on the 23rd of January, they all sat down together to confront Eric. And they don't mince words. Pay your debt, pay your rent on time, or you're out. Now, Eric over here does not take it well, and he suddenly feels very cornered by his other roommates, but instead of backing down, he started to threat them. If they kick him out, he says, he will send someone to beat them all up So contrary to all expectations, the confrontation ended up in a very heated argument. But over the following weeks, to everyone's surprise, things seemed to calm down a little bit, which is also because Eric paid his debt in full and also paid his rent in advance. So it is now the end of January 1970. And every year, from late January to mid-February, Quebec hosts its famous Winter Carnival. Now, according to the official website, Winter Carnival is something like an outdoor festival to celebrate winter and the Nordic culture, complete with ice sculptures, concerts, and beautifully decorated parades. So taking advantage of these festivities, Eric Kranz decided to host a little winter carnival dinner party at the Maple House for his roommates, I guess, as some sort of peace offering. So Eric Kranz cooked dinner and everyone was just sitting around, talking and enjoying the evening. Everyone except John Purton, the 41-year-old, he had other plans for the night. And now it seems like everything's gonna be fine. But in fact, it is not. You see, a few days after dinner, Eric all of a sudden noticed that his heater is not working. And for some reason, Eric thought that his roommates turned off the heater deliberately to force him out. Now, obviously, at first, Richard, David, William, John, and Raymond denied having anything to do with the non-functioning heater. But as it would later turn out, Eric was not completely wrong about his suspicion. They did have something to do with the heater not working. They really did turn it off deliberately because David, John, William, Raymond, and Richard want Eric gone. Now you would think that Eric would just give it up, move to a different apartment, just pack up his stuff, right? But he doesn't. He's not having it, and he fights back using questionable methods. For example, after this heating incident, one evening, in a fit of rage, Eric smashed the window in his bedroom door, saying if he doesn't get heat, he will get it from the hallway. Things, in fact, got so heated and Eric was so furious and out of control, the other roommates were eventually forced to call the police. Though once the officers arrived at Maple House, Eric somewhat tried to pull himself together and he was trying to be cooperative. Nevertheless, he was arrested and he had to spend one night in jail. So while Eric is locked up, the rest of his roommates do not waste one moment and they get to work immediately. And they use this opportunity to clear out his entire room. Eric comes back the next morning and sees all of his belongings and all of his stuff stacked up right in front of the Maple House. Now again, Eric is furious and he again starts to threaten his other roommates, but he also knows that he has to restrain himself if he doesn't want to spend another night in jail. And so Eric leaves. But he does not only leave the apartment and Maple House, he also leaves Canada. Yes, next thing you know, he hops on a bus to New York City and he was never seen again. Something that the other roommates aren't exactly heartbroken about. Because they think to themselves, well, now there's finally peace and quiet. But things are about to take a very different turn. Shortly after Winter Carnival ended, a flu wave swept through the entire area. And one by one, people started to get sick. You know, runny noses, coughing, everyone gets sick. Raymond, Richard, David, and William. The only one who did not get sick for some reason is John Purden. The strange thing is, though, that the symptoms are not typical flu symptoms. Instead, the roommates are suffering from constant weakness, extreme fatigue, and exhaustion. And what's even weirder is that the symptoms and the flu don't go away. Things get worse by the day, despite the fact that we are talking of young athletic students. Richard Davis and William Butler are hit especially hard. Both lost a significant amount of weight and soon can't even get out of bed without help. And on February the 12th, 1970, things got so bad with the two of them that they had to be admitted to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Montreal for shortness of breath. Their condition was actually so severe, the doctors were like, this ain't no ordinary flu, and they actually suspected a serious case of pneumonia first. So antibiotics, great. The strange thing was, the antibiotics didn't really seem to do much. They had absolutely no effect. All the while, their condition continued to deteriorate. And in the meantime, David Fisk and Raymond Keefe Fern also had to be hospitalized for the same exact symptoms. And shortly after, Richard Davis and William Butler were in respiratory failure and had to be placed in intensive care. No one had any idea what was wrong with them, but one thing the doctors were certain of: they could not really say whether these two will survive this. It is now a matter of life and death. Every second counts. But doctors unfortunately had to admit that they were running out of answers and they were pretty much at the end of their wisdom. So they decided to seek help from outside. And they asked one of the professors of McGill University to take a look at this case. And so he did. Now, this professor decided to examine the stomach contents, but also the coughed up mucus from the 4 patients. And he ended up making an unbelievable discovery that would make both medical and criminal history. Get this. He found parasites of the species of Ascaris zoom, also known as the pig roundworm, in the system of those 4 patients. Until then, these parasites had only ever been found in pigs. One did not even know that they could also infect humans. I know this is super gross, but just for the sake of the story, let's take a look at what happens once you're infected with this parasite. So once these parasites are in your system, the female worms will lay tens of thousands of eggs in the host's intestine. Now these eggs are excreted, are ingested by another host. They travel through the intestines into the bloodstream and ultimately lodge in the lungs. The host will cough up mucus with the parasites in it, swallow it again, so the parasites will end up in your intestines again, where they fully mature into grown worms that can get as long as 16 inches. Now, this kitten causes severe nutrient depletion, therefore the weight loss, but it also interferes with the oxygen transport in the blood, therefore the respiratory failure. So finally, do doctors know what nearly killed these students? They're giving the right medicine and all of them survive, but barely. But the big question remains, where did these 4 patients get infected in the first place? And given the circumstances, a fear of an outbreak or a pandemic even are not entirely unreasonable. But since they found nearly mature worms in these 4 patients, the infection must have occurred weeks earlier. Oh, by the way, honey, you want to guess how many parasites were found in each single patient? You really want to know? All right. Between 300 and 400,000. Now, to trace the source, the professor coming from McGill University again sat down with these 4 students and together with them tried to reconstruct the previous weeks. And his calculations point to January the 30th through February the 4th. So the time of Winter Carnival. So now these students are asked to create a list with everyone they had interfered with the previous weeks. So everybody is informed to get tested. Most of them do, but all results come back negative. Now, obviously, there's 2 names on this list that are particularly interesting to health authorities. And these are the names John Purdon and Eric Kranz. Now, John Purdon was the only one who did not get sick. He never showed any symptoms and his results came back negative. Eric Kranz, however, cannot be reached or located otherwise. Through Eric's father, health authorities learned that Eric was currently residing in Mexico, which is bad news for 2 reasons. First of all, authorities were concerned about his health condition. Let's just say he was infected. he might as well have carried the parasite into another country. But more importantly, health authorities had a lot of questions about Eric's field of study. Because, my little detectives, you might have noticed that I have never mentioned what he's studying. Eric Kranz studies parasitology. Now, health authorities, and by this point, federal authorities as well, also learned about the conflict that was going on in the Maple House with Eric Kranz. They learned about his threats and the Winter Carnival dinner party Eric had hosted, where he had cooked for everyone. Everyone except John Purdon, who had different plans that night and did not get sick. And so the puzzle pieces started coming together. On March the 5th, 1970, all 4 patients were able to leave the hospital and go back home again. Everyone survived, but everyone will also suffer permanent lung damage. In the meantime, an arrest warrant was issued for Eric Kranz, who was still in Mexico. Eric Kranz had absolutely no intention to go back to Canada and probably turn himself in or something, but luckily his father and their expensive lawyer traveled to Mexico and were actually able to convince Eric to go back to Canada and turn himself in, which he did on the 10th of March. He spent 1 night in custody before Daddy got him out on bail again. Oh, and by the way, his flight to Mexico wasn't entirely random. While he was still in New York, he had already learned from a different student that they were looking for him in Canada. Now, at trial, for some reason, the main focus was Eric's personality. A lot of fellow students testified in court and described him as a strange loner. Also, obviously, all the other roommates testified, and they told authorities and the judge that Eric had decorated his entire room with some weird political statements and slogans. For example, Eric Kranz over here had declared himself the quote-unquote president of the radical underground for an intelligent, benevolent dictatorship, a movement he had invented and was actively trying to recruit for on campus. Now, as for the charges, Eric Kranz obviously maintained his innocence. He said that all of these threats were just empty words, nothing more. He also offered a different explanation for the infection. So he and his lawyer explained in court that the parasites might have entered the house through a backed-up kitchen sink. So after days of deliberation, the judges came back with a verdict. And Eric Kranz was found not guilty. Yes, he was acquitted of all charges. I know, I was surprised too. You want to know why? The judges ruled that the prosecution failed to conclusively disprove the defense's theory and failed to meet evidentiary requirements. What does that mean? So while lab tests confirmed the parasite infection in these 4 patients, a second independent lab report required under evidentiary rules was never formally submitted. And so, Eric Kranz walked free after almost killing 4 of his roommates. And with that, we better close case file number 106, the college parasite poisoning. Thank you so much for joining me today and tuning in. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. If you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment. I read every single one. Now, before you go, next Friday, I'll be launching my new audio true crime podcast, House of Jack and Jeffrey. And to celebrate, I will be uploading 2 episodes at a time. So I'm really looking forward to that. Let me know what you think. I'm really, really excited. And other than that, the weekend is here. So happy weekend. Try to relax a little bit. Kiss. Mwah. And I'll see you then. Bye.